So for the last week, I've been binge reading works of Osho. He's one of my favorite thinkers. I mentioned him several times on the podcast, and I took a step back from, reading about, AI and technology and science, and I just wanted to sort of reground myself. And listening to Osho, for me personally, feels a bit like he's like verbal psilocybin, right? Like if there's something that you want to take, right, that is legal and that grounds you and makes you more compassionate, more open, more loving, more connected, just listen to some Osho talks. Now, you guys know how I feel about him as a person. And those who don't, I feel nothing. That was his persona. There was a lot of controversy around him, but to use one of his quotes, a finger pointing to the moon is not the moon, right? A fool looks at the finger that's pointing to the moon, right? So those are basically ways of saying, don't get distracted by the bullshit, right? If there's wisdom and it's there and it's beneficial, the source of it doesn't matter, right? If there's beauty and it's there and it brightens up the world, the source of it should not matter, right? So I really don't care too much about the controversy around him. His philosophy, I have described him as a philosophy professor, right? A philosopher with Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, Tolstoy influences, along with Epicurus sort of underlining themes. So he reads or listens, however you're going to take in his information, if it's audiobooks. Oh, I should start by saying to the new listeners, welcome. If you're listening to me and you find that I'm speaking slow, please utilize the speed increase on any platform you're listening to. Just increase the speed. It's going to be probably an hour. You're in for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending on what we end up talking about today. But you can get through that information by just increasing the speed. Double it up, do 1.5x speed. But take advantage of that, not just for this podcast, but for audiobooks. I encourage all my listeners to, listen to books as opposed to sitting and looking. There's a book called The Shallows, What the Internet's Doing to Our Brain. And basically what that book says is that we're essentially turning into like a species that is incapable of focusing for long periods of time. So I'm hearing a lot of people kind of telling me that they can't sit and read books anymore. So they've sort of given up. And my solution to that is like, first, I get it, right? We got these smartphones in our hands, and while they are a necessary evil, right? And look, I'm able to connect with you guys on here. I'm able to talk to people in the Discord. So shout out to everyone in the Discord channel. The negative to that is that it is changing our brains. So I always recommend, if you cannot sit and focus on reading a book, find an audible version, an audio version. And you don't have to use the Audible app. I believe Priya from our Discord channel mentioned like a Scribner or something like that. And you can go to your local library and get audiobooks there. But one, listen to books. You are meant to take in information through like oral processes anyway, right? Before the written word came along, that was how information was passed on. The brain takes in information best, not visually, but, through hearing, right? So, books are a relatively recent invention, a new invention, and it is an invention, right? So just bear that in mind. So use that. And two, sometimes the narration can be a bit slow. I have primed my mind to now listen to books at 3.5x speed, and I'm constantly checking to see if there's an update and see if I can bump things up to 4 or 4.5. I don't know who I need to talk to do that. If you work for Audible and you can do me a favor, I would really appreciate that. I didn't start off, guys, at 3.5x speed. I had to prime my mind and just slowly bumping up the speeds until now I can listen comfortably at 3.5x speed. So if I can do it, so can you. But that's the way I recommend that you take in information. So back to what I was saying. So I have been this week listening to Osho. The books that I've taken in that I've gotten a lot out of is, I read a lot. Nirvana, The Last Nightmare, was a talk. The Buddha Said was another talk. The God Conspiracy was another talk. The Book of Wisdom was another talk. Philosophia Ultima. And now today, Tao, the Golden Gate, Volume 1. I've been kind of binging a lot. I just realized, I have been listening, but that's just from this week. But I've also been painting a lot, and so I listen to books when I paint. Tao, the Golden Gate, Volume 1, and then the Dhammapada, Volume 3. So that's what I've been listening to. My favorite, I don't expect you to listen to all of these, but I would say my favorite, top 3 would be The God Conspiracy, The Book of Wisdom, and Philosophia Ultima. It is essentially Buddhism meets philosophy. And like I said, it's sort of like LSD or psilocybin without having to take the drugs. You come away from listening to his talks, just looking around and just going okay, it's cool. It is what it is. Okay. So I want to share some of that with you. If you're willing to take in the information. So I sometimes watch TV shows. The current show that I'm binge watching is Vampire Diaries. Judge me. I don't care. The show's great, guys. It's fucking adorable. I love all the characters. It's well written. It's kind of mindless stuff. But it's a brilliant show, for what it is. Lots of eye candy, just a good show. There's witches, there's vampires, there's werewolves. I love fantasy. I love sci-fi and fantasy. So if you haven't watched the show before, I recommend it. I've heard of it, but I never watched it. And we were just randomly flipping through Netflix trying to figure out what to watch next. And I was fuck it, let's just watch Vampire Diaries. And I was 2 episodes in and I'm hooked. So we're in season 3 now. But as a character, his name is Damon. He starts off kind of like a villain. And as you guys probably know, I tend to kind of root for villains. And not intentionally just terribly written villains, right? That's not my shtick, right? I like the sort of individuals who think they're doing the right thing, or they're sort of angsty in a way, or you know what I mean, they are misunderstood, or their heart's in the right place, but the actions, they're going about things the wrong way, right? Those are my favorite kinds of villains. They could be heroes, but for the draw of the straw, so to speak, right? And as I'm watching this show, the character Damon, he gets introduced, and it's they're setting it up first, you're supposed to not like him kind of thing, but I just couldn't help but like him. And I sat back and I thought, as I was appreciating him as a character, I'm yeah, he's clearly the villain, so I'm just going to appreciate him as the villain. I paused and I let that kind of saturate and sink in, and I started to think about free will, the illusion of free will, and determinism. And now I've actually had a couple of conversations this week alone with a couple individuals about how free will is an illusion and that we're living in a, deterministic society. And it's always hilarious to me when you have this conversation, especially face to face with a person. The first thing they do is grab something and they go, I've got freedom. See, I can do this. And they pick up a fork or something. And my response is just to go, yeah, that's not free will. You can control your body, right? But if we're talking about on a grand scheme, on a metaphysical level, in terms of the cosmos, and your path and your life, you're not in control of anything. I said, what you're demonstrating to me is if we were chickens, right? on a farm, right? And I tell you, hey, like, we are being controlled by like the human, like the farmer or something like that, or the person that feeds us, whatever. And you respond like, no, I'm free. Look, I can run around. My response to you is like, all you are is a free range chicken. But at the end of the day, like there are fences up. We can't really go where we want to go. Right. And there's only so much that you can do. It's a limited free will. And my favorite euphemism is the only freedom that we have is like a violin. A violin has the freedom to move around in its case, right? But at the end of the day, you're still encased, right? Now, people don't like to hear that. And like when you say it to them, like I said, they always respond in the same way. Well, look, I can move my arms. And it's like, okay, that's not free will. And one of the conversations that I had, the person I had it with was like, well, if I decide, I don't understand their logic, but I'm going to share it with you guys anyway. And now this is a very intelligent individual. This is like a clinical, like psychologist, but they're trying to argue with me. And they were saying, which is never a good idea, which they were saying, well, I have free will. If I decide I'm going to leave my house and go from my house to the gas station, I've exercised, my free will. I said, okay, well, what if you get into a car accident? Then they said, well, I've caused my own accident by leaving the house. And I said, that's not how cause and effect works. You were saying you're trying to get from point A to point B, and point B is the gas station. And what I'm telling you is you can't even will yourself to the gas station without something happening to you. Then you don't have free will. And then sometimes, like, you don't even want to get up and get in your car, right? Even though you know you need to. So there's that internal conflict going on there, right? And sometimes, even if you do, you may start your car and it may not work. Like, look at your life and look at everything that has happened and ask yourself, how much of it truly was your freely chosen? Like, this is what you actually want. You're doing what, when you were a kid, you were like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. Like, how much of us are actually doing that? And how much of what you're doing isn't essentially a reaction to caused events that you had no control over? And what I mean by that is like your parents, for example, right? So this person is a clinical therapist. Now, this is a young man. I don't imagine as a kid or as a teenager, they were like, when I grow up, I'm going to be a clinical therapist. In fact, prior to going back to school to get their master's, they worked as an EMT, which I would say that was probably something else that was thrust upon them. Look, guys, I'm sitting and giving a podcast. I love podcasting, but if you ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be a fashion designer, right? And I wanted to be a professor. Now, those things are probably, still probable. They exist as probable realities to be actualized. But I'm sitting talking to you guys on a podcast right now. I'm not a professor. A series of events occurred that were beyond my control that took me off the path that I had that I definitely wanted to be on and how I saw my life going, right? There's very little in my life that has happened in my life that happened because I willed it so. There's a lot more in my life that I did not will, that I have just learned to sort of like deal with. And I think that if you pause and you look at your own life, you'd find the same thing, right? Case in point, let's just take something even smaller, right? Let's not think like grand existentialists, right? Let's just think like, okay, working out, right? We're in February now. How many of you guys had New Year's resolution? And how many of you have sort of not been keeping up with your New Year's resolution? Right? It takes an act of will to get up and exercise every day, right? But what happens as time progresses and the year goes on, the year moves on, your will essentially gets overrun, overpowered by external circumstances and your own body, right? Your own body says, I'm tired, I don't feel like it. And then you are just subject to your body's reaction and responses and essentially decisions, right? You're not your body. You're not your body. You're not your body. So if you can't even exert your own will over your own body, right, to get in shape, to eat healthy, to stop drinking without making all these excuses, don't look me in the face and tell me you have free will. That's bullshit. You don't. Like, and this could be a whole, all I said to this individual was read Sam Harris's book on free will, because he does a great job of talking about that. And I don't want to that's not what this episode is about. But what we discussed, I said, even desires, right? I was like, the fact that I'm sitting and having this conversation with you, this was like not really what I had in mind as far as what I wanted to do today. I wanted to paint. I wanted to work today. But then I got a text message out of the blue from this individual, and they said, let's meet up. And then I checked. It wasn't even like an okay. I checked to see if I had the desire. Now, where do desires come from? And if I had another desire, an alternative desire, to basically just stay at home and keep painting, I would not be having that conversation. But I had to first check. And it was my desires that drove me. It was my desires that mandated whether or not I, stop painting. I had a desire to keep painting, but the desire to meet up with this individual sort of overpowered my desire to keep painting. And so that was what drove me, right? Now, the difference is I'm relatively conscious, right? Most people are blindly being led here and there by their desires that they don't control. You don't know where your desires come from. Same thing as you don't know where your thoughts come from. So you're just constantly reacting to desires, right? And like Harris says in his book, Free Will, when you decide, okay, I'm going to write a book, where did that desire? Why today? Say you just woke up with the desire, you know what, today, this is it. I'm going to take charge of my life. I'm going to write my book. And this is when you finally do it after like several attempts. Why was today the day? What was the series of events that happened that you are not even conscious of that led you to be able to start your book today? All right. You're not in control. And people don't like that because a lot of people's lives are essentially spent desperately trying to control their entire lives. And you can't even control your body, right? You can't control how you react to things, right? You can't control how you react to other people. Okay, so bring it back to Vampire Diaries. You're probably thinking like, wait, what is it? Yeah, we're going to bring it all the way back. Okay, we're going to bring it all the way back. So as I sit and I'm watching this character, Damon, right? The temptation, there's a lot of people who watch TV. When you watch TV with your family and friends or whatever, pay attention, right? What will happen? You start to criticize the character. Well, the characters in the show, in my opinion, are essentially reflections of human beings, right? The characters in a movie are essentially, their lives are constructed, right? And pre-written, right? So they're just doing what the plot calls for, right? And to write a plot, it's a series of causes and effects, and the character just reacts to things that are happening. And that's human beings, right? So let's take the story of Damon. Damon is a villainous vampire, but he didn't want to be a vampire. Shit just happened to him, right? Life just happened to him. And then a series of different events, right? One being like scorned to love or whatever, another him being a fucking vampire, right? Made it so that he essentially like had to turn off his humanity, which then made him sort of a villain, right? But it's not really his fault, right? It's life happening to him, which then kind of life events was what whittled him into the character that he is now, right? So, and those life events, you could look at it as essentially like plot, right? That is the plot of the story. So it doesn't make any sense if you're watching a show and the character is not behaving the way you want them to behave, for you to sit there and go like, why would you do that? Which we do this all the time. I do this when I watch movies, not so much anymore now because that wakes me up and makes me think about exactly what we're talking about right now. Like, oh my God, why would you do that? It's like, well, because they were written that way, right? So if a character on TV has no control over why they do what they do because that's how they're written that way, right? then you have to pause and reflect back into our society and into our reality and understand that most of the human beings that you're interacting with, all of the human beings, unless you're like a Zen monk somewhere, all of the human beings have zero control over who they are. Life circumstances, not just in this incarnation, mind you, right? But in past and future incarnations as well. Life circumstances have shaped them into the character that you're seeing right now. And so instead of criticizing, right, which is what causes us to suffer, because that in that act of criticism, there's that expectation that the person should be different than what they actually are or who they actually are, which is insane when you think about it, because that's who they are. That's how they were written. That's how life events, life circumstances have shaped them. Right? If you look at a piece of art and it's carved, a sculpture has been carved into stone, you would be a little insane, a little mad to say, oh, well, I wish that the arms were bigger or that it was made of clay, not stone. Like, that's unnecessary. Just observe the art for what it is. If it's not your cup of tea, then it's not your cup of tea. But I would suggest that you just appreciate it as is, instead of wanting it to be different, right? The moment you start desiring for things to be different, when you have no control, your desire for something doesn't determine, right, what that thing will or will not be. Your desire is just your desire. It might be linked to a particular experience, but as it stands, most of the time when you're complaining about how you want things to be, it doesn't really affect the grand scheme of things. The universe doesn't give a fuck about how you want things to be. If that was the case, like, think about it, how much we're all decent human beings, right? The majority of human beings are good people with good hearts. We look around, we look at the circumstances we find ourselves in, and we look at the world as it is, and we see people who are homeless on the street. We see children with cancer, and diseases. We see terrible things. The world right now, it seems like we're inching towards yet another like fucking close like encounter with war, like a third war, like another world war. And I would guarantee you, like, nobody listening to this is like, yeah, let's fucking go to war. I would guarantee you that even less so, the soldiers that we're preparing to send over there to fight in another fucking bullshit war that has been essentially constructed by sociopaths who will never see the end of a rifle, will never feel the burn of an exploding bomb. They're the ones who can sit in their castles, in their mansions, and dictate where our youth, our young men or women will go to fight and drag billions, 8 billion people into yet another fucking world war. But the majority of people, 7.99999 billion people, don't want that. We don't desire that. And that's a whole nother conversation. I'm going to get back to that. Ties in with my dream. But at the end of the day, that's where it seems like we're moving towards. Unless we collectively, that's something we're going to talk about now, is the power of the collective. In a little bit, we're going to talk about the power of the collective. All right. You as an individual have some power. Okay. But the greater power of the human race stems not from doing something independently, but from harnessing the power of the collective. We've talked about this before, but let me finish my thought. So when I watch the show Vampire Diaries and I sit back and I look at all these characters, the show became much more enjoyable for me when I stopped criticizing every little thing that the characters were doing and just enjoyed and appreciated the plot for what it was, the story for what it was, the characters for what it was, the art for what it is, and became a good observer. Okay? What I mean by that as a good observer is, so have you ever like watched a movie that you really enjoyed and then you read the shit that the critics have written about it and you're just like, I totally disagree with everything that the critics are saying because it's bullshit. Right? So a lot of the times when a professional movie critic doesn't actually produce movies, if they did, they wouldn't really be going that hard on a movie, right? Because they understand the time, energy, and effort it takes to create, right? Most of the time, like, critics are just like professional, like, complainers who like to judge, right? And somehow they know they knew the right person or whatever, and they end up holding a position where that's their job, to just point at art and say it's bad or good. But those people aren't happy, right? It's like, you're not in a good mental state if you sit back and you just say this is bad and this is bad and I wouldn't do this, okay? Because at the end of the day, you sitting on your high horse and pointing and declaring things as good and bad does not change it. The movie is done, it is filmed, right? It's been put out, and all you're essentially attempting to do is to either encourage people or discourage people from enjoying something that you have no knowledge of whether or not the person would enjoy, because ultimately that is determined. That depends on the individual who's watching, which is why a lot of the times you go and watch, like, the Eternals, terrible reviews. I fucking loved it. They said it was very wordy and preachy and long and yada, but that shit was deep. Like, it was one of actually my favorite Marvel movies. It wasn't all just fucking blowing shit up, right? It was like depth there. There was character development, and there was like mythos and psychology. And I started to wonder, like, wait, are we Eternals? Right? Like, are conscious people Eternals? Is that why you have nightmares? Have we experienced this world like fucking bombing, like being destroyed by a war over and over again? Is this why we repeat certain cycles? Like, that, to me, movies that make me think, movies that like change my perception of reality or just make me sort of like look at things differently, I enjoy. Right? But a handful of individuals came together and just like destroy, it's a very long movie. Okay, then don't fucking watch it. Right? If it's not your cup of tea, I am not personally a big fan of abstract art. So I'm not going to put myself in situations where I'm going to observe and or criticize, because that puts me in a negative space, right? Think about it. Okay. It's not something I like, right? Or something I have an appreciation for, right? But I'm going to continuously put myself in situations where I have to sit there and talk negatively about something that I don't have an appreciation for or understanding of. Why would I do that to myself? That's toxic. It's not good. That you can't criticize other people without harming yourself, right? Because one, you're putting yourself in a negative mental space because you're talking about something that you cannot control and you cannot change. And you're failing to accept reality as it is. And that aspect of reality is that you don't control anything. You're not in control. You're not in control. It is what it is. Just control what you can control, which more often than not, it is yourself, right? Sharing knowledge, being kind, being appreciative. But at the end of the day, looking at things as they are and just going, okay, so that's just how this person is, and just accepting it is a better mental state than judging. I don't like this. I don't like that. This good, bad, or it doesn't matter. Why does it? Nobody fucking cares. Also, nobody fucking cares. The universe doesn't give a fuck about what you like or don't like. So stop wasting the energy. Honestly, you're just putting yourself in a mental state for no reason. Right? And when you sit back and you just enjoy, you just sit back and you just sit with everything that's going on and observe, right? You put yourself into a better mental state and you are at peace. That is what the Buddhists have talked about, right? It's just acceptance. Everything I've just said, that's basically the tenets. It's just a modern way of saying, like, of retelling Buddhism. Right? Buddhism says, like, you're not in control, right? Just like essentially just go with the flow, right? We have the desire. It's right. Desire is a root cause of suffering. Well, what is desire? Desire is thinking that what you want has some sort of influence over the reality experience that you have. And I know I can feel a lot of people aren't going to like this episode. I don't care, right? I didn't like hearing it either. 'Cause I was a control freak, right? Just having this constant desire of, I need things to be this way. I need things to be this way, right? Trying to control everything. That was a very tight, I was a very tense individual, right? Because it reflects on your body. But the older you get, the more you realize that just because you want something to be a particular way doesn't mean it will be. And so it's just easier to understand that life is going to happen. Do what you can. I'm not saying just sit back and let life happen to you. You still, like these characters, right? I was getting to that point, okay? I'm not saying just sit back and just like be depressed and not do anything. No. Like those characters, like on Vampire Diaries, like they're all playing their parts, right? But they're not aware if the characters were sentient, right? Like if the characters were sentient, they're not aware of what the overall plot is. They're just sort of, these are the lines that have been programmed in. I want you to imagine what the future of entertainment will be like in 100 years. So like 100 years ago, is this like 1920 or whatever? Like think about movies, right? They were called like there were silent movies, and then it kind of evolved into like the talkies or whatever. And it was like nobody was even really talking. It was lots of like movement, and then there would be like a caption or something like that, and then more movement, and then there would be a caption or whatever. And now think about where we are now. Like we have 3D movies and things. So in 100 years from now, you will be able to be a character in Vampire Diaries. Like you're going to put on a helmet. I'm telling you guys, this is going to happen. It's already happening now in the future, but you're going to, assuming we don't all die. Well, even if we do all die, we're just going to get transferred to a parallel universe, where we survive, World War III. So anyway, so in the future, in whatever parallel universe, there will be like our entertainment system will consist of putting on a helmet. You plug in your favorite like movie or your TV show, and instead of watching these characters, you pick the character, and this will be interactive. You can either I'm telling you guys, bet money. Okay. I'm telling you, I've seen this in the future. So you're going to connect to the internet, and you can either watch Vampire Diaries like with your family members or your friends, or you can watch it with like random strangers the way you would interact or play video games, right? So then you'll become Damon, right? Or you can become Stefan or whatever character that is your favorite. And then there's a button that you push, and it like just does something to like your amygdala or whatever. And while you are playing, or while you're playing as Damon, right? You walk up to the mirror and look in the mirror, and what you're going to see reflected back to you is the face of Damon, right? You're going to say his lines. All of the lines are going to be programmed, and all of his actions, every little thing that he does, you will literally become these characters. And that's going to be what the future of movie watching is. You're going to smell everything, you're going to taste everything, and however long you decide you're going to binge, it's going to make for some pretty interesting dreams, but for however long you decide you're going to binge and play as a different character, that's what it is. And the plot's already going to be pre-written before you even get the DVD or whatever, like it's or whatever it's going to be called. Let's say VRD or whatever. Whatever it's going to be called. It's already pre-written. So then the characters, the plot's already there. And maybe you can make slight modifications, but the overall plot is going to be the overall plot. Like maybe you decide to go in a coffee shop today, as opposed to like not, going, it's not going to really change the grand script of anything. Like what's going to happen is going to happen. The major plot points are going to be there, and they're going to stick, and then you're going to live, and then however the story ends, you're going to experience it. However that character ends, you're going to experience that, and then boom, it's going to fade to black, and then you're going to take off your helmet, and then you're back to reality. And I'm saying that's what I've been saying this. That's kind of what we are in right now. We gotta be. I'm sorry, but it's what makes the most sense to me. I'm not saying accept what I'm saying as gospel, but it's what right now makes the most sense to me especially when you talk about simulation hypothesis. So if that's the case, then right? If this is a simulation, you got to take what that means and then you fucking run with it, right? So if this is a simulation, then understand that the characters that you interact with have been designed and finely tuned, and they are who they are. They're like a daemon, right? So complaining about how the person acts or behaves or talks or whatever doesn't really do anything. They are who they are. So just the story's been written, the plot's been determined. We're plugged in. Our consciousness is plugged in as whatever persona you happen to be inhabiting right now. When you look in a mirror, that's not really you. That's a persona that you're playing as right now, like you would in any VR game. If you're playing as like, like in Tomb Raider, Lana, whatever her name is. I always want to say, was it Lana Kane from Archer? But clearly that's not, although they are similar. I wonder if actually, anyway, maybe they were based off of each other, Lana. Anyway, I digress. So just sitting back, and instead of going, okay, like this person is this, right? We think if you sit back, it's kind of violence. If you sit back, it's a verbal violence when you sit and you listen to the way we talk about each other, right? We're like critics of a movie, right? We didn't create these characters. We didn't create these people. And these people didn't create themselves. They just are who they are, right? And instead of just going, that's just who the person is, we start walking around like judging, right? Like, that person's an idiot. That person's stupid. You cut me off, you effing da-da-da-da-da, right? Instead of just like taking a step back and just watching, just observing. Right? And every time we do that, we strengthen that voice in our head that's going to turn around and judge us the same way. Right? So if you're walking around calling other people stupid for making little mistakes and being human and not being perfect, that voice in your head that's coming out of your mouth is going to internalize and do the same thing to you when you fall short, because literally perfectionism is not something that human beings are inherently programmed with. You cannot be perfect in this reality. You're not supposed to be. What we have been programmed to accept as our imperfections, or what we've been programmed to think of as our quote imperfections, are actually character traits, right? They're what, and I talked about this in the last episode, but it bears repeating. They are what makes us different from the next person and the next person, and makes us unique. And that's it. So when you watch a character in let's say Vampire Diaries, and you look at like Stefan and you look at Damon, you could sit and and sort of criticize and judge and say, oh, these are badly written characters, or like it's so obvious that like, he's like a villain, but you know how this is going to end. Like, you can take that energy, but then you're just kind of a dick, right? And yes, I understand that that's judgmental, but it goes, it has to be said. You're being a dick, right? Just, you didn't write the characters, right? Just sit back and fucking appreciate it. And the same for you. The same for yourself. There's so many people walking around who don't like who they are. I'm not saying that if there are aspects of your persona that you would rather change, not improve, but change, then do that. Tweak what you can, right? I've just started working out. That was my kind of New Year's resolution, but I started in December. I was just inspired by by a persona who like works out. They used to be bigger, and then they lost a bunch of weight and they look great. And for the first time in my adult life, like I've literally never exercised before. I've just been naturally thin. I decided, you know what? Like, I'm going to start biking. And I started doing that. And I'm really liking that. But it's not an improvement. It's not an improvement to me, it's just a change, right? So I was this person who never worked out, but now I'm a person who does work out, and I kind of like it. And for me, it's also an exercise in, it's just a small exercise. It's the violin moving around in the case kind of thing. It's just a small act of will, just a small act of will to just get up and bike, right? And for 36 years, shunned exercise. physical activity. I don't like sweating, right? I'm that person, or I was. But this has been just a small way to exercise, like a free-range chicken, just a small way to exercise a little modicum of will, right? The grand big picture things, I'm not in control. We are at the mercy of fate, okay? Even the gods were at the mercy of fate. All right, the Greeks and the Romans knew this, okay? It is what it is. And if you look at fate as, if you want to use sort of like a modern retelling, if you say, okay, we're in a simulation, then you can look at fate as the storyline, all right? So the overall storyline has already been pre-written, yeah? And that is what we call fate. Yeah, but there's things that you can change within like the subplot or whatever, but the overall storyline, it is what it is for the most part. Now, accepting that is what brings peace. That is something that the Buddha talked about, is just acceptance of what is, right? So, one, when you have a desire for something, recognize that sometimes having a desire and hope coupled together is you're setting yourself up. It's a trick. Hope is like a trick of the mind. This bears repeating, and I'm repeating intentionally. There's some elements that I've repeated in the past episode as well, but sometimes you got to hear something over. No, not sometimes. You have to hear something over and over again in different ways for it to sink in and for your mind to accept it. So this is very intentional. That is how you learn. Okay. I forgot what I was talking about. That's okay. It'll come to me. Acceptance of what is. All right. So the Buddhists talked about suffering. Oh, hope. Yes. So I always say that there's a reason why hope was in Pandora's box of evils. When you hope for something, right? When you desire something, right? Most of the time, and this is why I have an issue with desire, most of the time when you hope for something, that is paired with this mindset, with this idea that simply because you hope for it, you will make it so. It will come to pass, right? And so you get your hopes up with this expectation that something's going to work out the way you want it to work out simply because you desire it, right? And in some instances, it does work out, although I would say that's more that the reason why you had a desire for it in the first place. So we're going to talk about retro causality briefly. I talked about this on the Discord channel, but the reason why you have the desire for something in the first place is because you will, right? It's like we talk about subplots. You will experience the thing that you desire. And so that's why you have the desire for it in the first place. So the future is influencing the past. So remember I said earlier, where do desires come from? Well, if you don't know where desires are coming from, particular desires, it could be because, your mind is not limited. It's not limited to just this moment in time, right? And if time is a cycle, not linear, and all the time is happening at once, sometimes, right, the information of experiences that you will have in the future kind of seeps back to influence your present, like a plot, right? So you can't say, okay, I believe in the simulation hypothesis without considering everything and the implications, okay? So let's go back to a TV show. There's something called foreshadowing, right? So you're like a character will do something or say something, and it's typically linked to something that's already sort of that the writers know is going to happen in the future, but that's why they have it in the past where the character is like talking about it or dealing with it or something like that. And I'm saying that your desires sometimes are the simulation's way, or the AI that, runs the simulation. It's a way of foreshadowing that you are going to have a particular experience. Okay. So we're getting kind of fun and funky in here. If this is like your first episode you're listening to, please understand that on this podcast, what we do is we're running on the assumption that the simulation hypothesis is accurate, that we are in a simulation, and then we're just building from there. Okay, so it's fun thinking. I'm not saying believe it. Nobody knows anything for a fact, but it is fun to talk about in this way. So think about your desires for something as foreshadowing of a particular reality experience in the future. So on the Discord channel, we had a talk last weekend. We did a voice chat with members in the group. Please feel free to join, by the way. We're a small band of brilliant minds. So the more the merrier. But we talked about manifestation, right? And how, some yogis and gurus and teachers and spiritual leaders or whatever keep trying to tell you that you can manifest whatever reality experience that you want. And I don't subscribe to the whole idea of manifestation. I've looked into it, but in my experience and from just observing, you're really setting yourself up to suffer, right? Because if you get so overwhelmed, if you overwhelm your mind with the things that you want and reality experiences that you desire, and you think that you can just manifest it with sheer force of will, one, you're operating under the assumption that you can bend reality to your will. I'm going to say that again. That's insane. That's ego, by the way. And ego is dangerous, right? So you have to be mindful of how these sort of thinking, look, I should preface all of what I'm about to say by saying this, that what people who believe that they can manifest whatever realities that they want. We know what they believe, okay? And I'm just saying the opposite, okay? I love my life. And a lot of what has happened that has been good in my life did not come from me consciously manifesting it. It just came from me being lucky, okay? Have I had desires come to pass? Yes, I have. Have I done the whole vision board thing and wrote things? Literally, there are episodes on this podcast you can go back. And yes, I've done all of that. Have the things that have I focused and had positive mantras and positive thinking and X, Y, and Z? Absolutely. Okay, have they all come to pass? Absolutely fucking not. Okay, and I think if you're honest and realistic with yourself, the same you would say the same thing. So I'm not saying that it's all bunk. I'm saying I want to present to you, believe what you want. Okay, I'm not telling you what to believe. Okay, I just want to present to you a different way of looking at manifestation versus actualization and the dangers of focusing on trying to manifest things. Okay, so here's my perspective. One, when you say this is what I desire, right, and I'm going to manifest this. Okay, one, you're tapping into a lot of the things that the Buddha kind of warned against, which is understanding that when you have a desire for something, you're essentially introducing suffering into the scenario, because what you're trying to do is bend reality to your will. An individual is strong, but they're not as powerful as a collective, right? So if you have a desire for something, please understand that it needs, essentially what you're trying to do is bend reality to your will, but also bend the will of others to your will, and shape the storyline and have it converge down into a reality experience that you want. So you're trying to control reality as an individual. And I'm saying, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that it's highly, highly, highly improbable. And you just sitting and staring at a piece of paper with all the things that you said you want written on it that's not it. I have read about yogis who have wanted something, desired something, said something. These motherfuckers excuse my French, meditate day in, day out. Most of the clear-minded, most conscious people who are attempted to speak certain things into existence, and were able to have certain things happen, but not all of them. And what I'm saying is this. Once again, if time is not linear, if all of time is happening at once, and all of what we're experiencing, all of what we do experience, which is why deja vu and prophetic dreams are a thing, right? And time travel would be possible, right? Which you're saying theoretically could be possible. You would need to sort of, a black hole would need to be involved, or a wormhole. Although I've argued that wormholes would just take you to parallel universes, but I digress. Let's go back. In order for all of these things to occur, right, reality essentially has to be fixed. 40 block universe, okay? Reality has to essentially be fixed, like a Ferris wheel. It's the same cycle. So to say that you, as an individual, have the ability to manifest what you want, I'm calling bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers with this one. That's okay. I'm just saying, like, it's my opinion. I'm just saying it's bullshit. What I will say, before you jump down my throat, hear me out. What I will say is that desire, and something I always say, desire and outcome, a lot of the time are linked. Okay, so I think this is actually a more positive way of looking at something. That if you have a desire for something, to write a book, to be wealthy, to be successful in business, if you have a desire for something, it is because in the future, you have already attained it. So it's interchanged. So you have to think about it like the TV show. Why does a character have a desire for something? Well, it's because in the plot, right? That's a foreshadowing event. So that desire for something in the plot, it's already written. And so it's just now you're just watching how the character got to where they were going. But it's already there. It's already recorded on the DVD, ready to go. Like you're watching it on Netflix. But even when it's in the script, it's part of the plot. So what I'm saying is you don't have to manifest anything. Pay attention to the things that you do desire. Some things are just blind desire. Some things are just blind hope, right? And that shit, sometimes you just hope for shit and it doesn't fucking happen. And you can hope. I'm not saying don't hope, but I'm saying that when you do hope with the mindset, accept the possibility that what you hope for may not fall under the grand scheme, the overarching sort of plot of this story, right? Because a lot of the times what we hope for involve essentially either you're trying to, in a way, hack the overall plot line, hack the matrix, right? Which I'm sorry, but we're not there yet. At least I'm not. Or it involves the will of other people. And you have to be mindful of that, right? So when you're hoping for something that involves the will of other people, you have to operate with the understanding that it's not going to be cut and dry because you wrote that shit in a book. So this bears repeating, okay? If you have an intense desire for something, it may very well be because you will experience it in the future, right? Especially if it's something having to do with like you and your reality experience. If it's something that's more like it's involving other people's will, then that might be something completely different because that's dealing with other people's will. Okay. But if you have a desire for something, to be wealthy, to be successful, to be a good writer, to be a good artist, or whatever it is, right? And it's just something that keeps kind of like motivating you. It's more than likely because you've experienced it in the future. And so that desire is linked to the outcome in the future. So to me, it's not even a matter of like manifesting. It's more a matter of just persevering, right? Just being consistent, right? So consistency is what's most important. You just keep plugging at it, right? So it's like you have a desire to, like it's like a marathon, right? So you're training for a marathon. You'd like to finish the marathon. You just keep plugging at it. So just kind of get that in mind. So when you're so focused on like, I got to manifest this, what you're doing is you're kind of reinforcing that you are in control of not like just like yourself, like you have will, right? But also the entire universe. And so you can bend things to your will, because you have the desire for it. And all of those things essentially will cause you to suffer. So this is a reiteration of things that I've talked about, and it bears repeating. I needed to hear that, and I needed to meditate on that, and taking a step back from everything and going, okay, look, I'm not in control here, has been so cathartic, if that's the word, like if that's the right word. And so like has just caused me like so much like more peace, right? It's one thing to say, okay, I want this, right? I have a desire for this particular experience, right? I want to be with this person, okay? But if you spend a lot of time reading books, about like manifestation and control, to me, it feeds into the sense of like neuroticism, right? Because then you get sort of like blinded by like what you want, that the possibility that you may not be able to get what you want, you suppress that as a quote negative thought instead of a probability, that is something that could happen. So then you're not dealing with reality. And then if something that you want doesn't go the way you want, that's what causes a lot of pain and suffering and a lot of anger and a lot of depression, because you're so driven by what you want instead of just saying like, okay, like I have a desire for this thing. It may not happen. I'm not in control here. I'm just going to go with the flow and trust, right? Because that's literally all you can do. That's literally all you can do in this life. It's whoever needs to hear this is going to hear this and take it in. All right. It doesn't mean that you give up. Because I get up in the morning and I still work. I get up in the morning and I paint. I do have things. I have visions of what I want, my life to be like. There's things that I desire, right? But ultimately, I've stopped like trying to force and control things. And I've learned to just take a step back and observe life, right? And play the parts that I have the desire to play, right? I exert my will when and where I can, right? And it's usually over little things, like I should go work out. I need to do some push-ups. I should not eat these cookies. But big picture things, I'm essentially just like taking it a moment at a time. A lot of people get into the habit of asking you like, oh, how was your day? Did you have a good day today? And my response now lately has been, I don't live in day-tight compartments. I used to, right? This was something I learned from, I think it was like a Carnegie book or a Peel book. But one of those books said you should live in day-tight compartments. So instead of projecting myself in the future or in the past and like worrying, I think the book was called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And I think it was Norman Vincent Peale. He said to live in day-tight compartments, only live in the day that you're in. But what I do now is I now try to live in moment-tight compartments. Right? And I try to meditate within the moment. See, what you need to understand, and this is like an info dump, but it is beneficial. What you need to understand is that the mind, its function is to move like a searchlight. It's restless. It goes from side to side, front to back, all around, except for the focusing on what you need to focus now. And that's a loss of energy. That's a waste of energy. So that's why a lot of us suffer. You sit down, you have a conversation with most people, especially when you meet them. What do they want to talk about the most? Their past, right? And it's always like, and I've heard some pretty intense stories, right? And you can tell, like, that's why you're unhappy, why this person is unhappy. Because you sit down, you have a conversation with them, and they tell their life story, and it's typically told from a perspective of, woe is me, right? And they attach so much importance to the things that happened to them in their past, right? That they're still in the moment that they're talking about, and then you can feel the energy that comes with that, right? So For example, talking to a person who said, like the reason why I am the way I am is because, the way my parents raised me and they were just like this, that, and the other, right? And then you watch them and they're still in high school mentally, right? It's not an insult. I'm just saying, like, emotionally, their mind has moved like a spotlight and has shined the light of their consciousness on the past, and that they're sitting in front of you, but they're not there. And instead of sitting right there talking to you, engaging with you emotionally, they're in the past. They've gone back to that person cheating on them emotionally, right? And then all of the feelings come up with that, right? And now they're upset. That's an unhappy person. Or you meet some other people who it's not even scanning the past, it's now in the future. All the things that they're either afraid of or they hope for or they desire, right? And you're looking at that and you're going, okay, that's great. There's no guarantee that any of that shit's going to actually happen, but you're not talking about that shit like there's a possibility that shit won't happen, right? And as I talked about in the toxic positivity episode, like you're gassing yourself up without any sort of consideration that the shit that you would like may not happen. So you're not mentally preparing yourself for it, so that if it doesn't happen, then you can just be like, it's okay, and move on. And then if you do try to bring that up to a person and say, hey, listen, there's no guarantee that what you want will happen, you're now being called a negative person. No, I'm not being negative. I'm being realistic. That's not how life fucking works, right? Take a step back. Since you like to look at the past so much, take a step back and look at even the situation that you're complaining about regarding your parents. If you were in control of the situation, would you have had the parents that you had or the life experiences that you had in the past that you're so emotionally stuck on? No, you wouldn't have. Like, that's not how life works. Like, there's some shit that happened in your past that went the way you wanted to, great. But there's some shit that's going to happen to you in the future that's not going to go the way you want to. And that's something that the Stoics tell you to just mentally accept and prepare for, right? So that life, you're not creating undue suffering from yourself by allowing your mind to do the shit that it does, where it scans everywhere but the present. So I had a conversation with another person, and they were talking about a book that they were reading by the author who read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Now, I started that book a long time ago, and I powered through it because I don't like not finishing books, but I also returned it after I read it, because it just, be careful what you allow into your psyche, guys. You don't have to accept everything that you hear just because it was in a book or you heard it in a podcast, including the shit that I say. Okay, I love you guys, and I want you guys to form. I'm gonna keep saying this now. It's a new thing I'll say. Add that to the list of random, Joe sayings. Is form your own philosophy. Be an artist. Okay, what do artists do? What do creatives do? What do gods do? Right? They pull from pre-existing things. Let's go into the Bible. Right? When they talked about, I don't believe in the Bible. I'm just saying, just for illustrative purposes. When the Spirit of God moved across the waters, there was already waters there. And then he separated, or she separated, the God separated the waters from the land, right? And then they separated the water, and the water was there, and it called them sea. And then the land that was separated from the sea, he called land, or they called land. But if you go back and read Genesis, water was already there, right? Land was already there. It was just a separation. So that's how the creative process works. That's what painters do, right? Painters, artists will sit and look at shit that's already there and then create. They pull from different sources and create their own work of art. So I encourage you guys to have minds of creators, minds of artists. Pull philosophy from wherever, books, podcasts. Don't just blindly accept everything, right? Form your own philosophy. Intelligence is what's the most important thing. And you need to sharpen your mind's ability to create, right? So that's what I'm saying, okay? But back to what I'm saying. So you have a lot of people who, they read books. And so this individual had read Everything is Fucked by the same author who wrote The subtle art of not giving a fuck. Now, this individual made me read the book, and I was like, I went and read the synopsis, and I'm like, I'm not going to put that in my psyche. To me, it reads a bit like Stoicism, and I have my favorite Stoic philosophers. And so this individual wrote, went and read, books by Stoics, and then used their worldview to write this book. But that's their worldview, and just judging on like what the intro was and what people were saying about the book, it just wasn't something that I wanted to put into my psyche. But what this person was telling me was that the author was saying in this book is that you're never happy. Like, nobody's ever like truly happy. Now, I agreed with that statement a little bit, because that statement itself had helped me through like a bout of depression. So there was a point in my life when that would have resonated with me. So that's why I was like, okay, I'll listen with an open mind. But only because I viewed happiness as a flux, like a state of flux. Like, nobody's just happy all the fucking time. That's true, right? And I think that happiness, my philosophy about tongue-tied. My philosophy of happiness is that it comes in waves, right? Like, you're not going to be happy all the time, and that's okay. And I've said on the podcast, like, sometimes you just got to sit with the sadness and lean into the pain. So that I got. I was like, yeah, that can resonate with me. But then he went on and said that even if you're successful, happiness really means you just have a better set of problems. And I was like, ooh, that part I don't agree with. I appreciate the psychology and the life experiences that led the author to say what he said. And that's his philosophy, and that's what works for him. But that's not what works for me and my philosophy and my worldview. And that's okay. Right? But what I took issue with, right, is that if you're directing people to look at their problems and defining their problems through defining their happiness by the problems that they have, that's just to me unhealthy. And so what my retort back to this individual was, I'm happy right now. All right. In this present moment, right now, if I pull the fucking spotlight of my mind away from the future, away from the past, and I focus on right now, I'm happy. The reason why we lose our happiness is because we shift out of the present moment. And I'm not the first person to say this shit, and I'm not going to be the last, but it bears repeating because we keep forgetting, which is why I had to go back and reread Osho, because I forgot, right? Which I think is built into the simulation to just increase our suffering, I guess. I don't fucking know, but I forgot. Hopefully I don't forget this time. Right? That's why I've been binge reading all those books I listed, because I'm trying to drill this shit into my head. Now, the power of now, right? A new earth. All of these Ram Dass, Alan Watts, Osho, all of them, Meister Eckhart, they're all saying the same thing. Focus on now. 9 times out of 10, 9.9.9.99999% of the time, or 99.999% of the time, you're listening to podcasts right now, you should be happy. What takes you out of your happiness is you start thinking about like bullshit. And what I said to the person was, if I sat and I listed all my problems, then I'm going to take myself out of the now. And I said, look, I'm in pain. All right. And at the time I was having the conversation, I was. My back was hurting. My leg was hurting. My neck was hurting. I don't fucking know why. Like, just from painting and stuff like that. I've been painting a lot lately, and just sitting for long periods of time has been kind of like triggering my sciatic nerve. I don't care. It is what it is. I do my stretches. I work out now. That has helped greatly. All right. But if I sat and I was like, well, my set of problems are better than your problems, so that's why I'm happy. That's me still focusing on the problems. And what I said instead is, the reason why I'm happy is not because of my fucking problems being better than, my problems from last year. That's stupid, because I'm still thinking about my problems, and that's a terrible judgment. I'm not saying I'm not saying the individual is stupid. I'm just saying that the idea is stupid. It's not healthy. It might help other people, but I don't know if that's a healthy mindset. I said the reason why I'm happy now is because I'm having good food that I enjoy. I was having sushi at the time. And it was called like a dark dragon roll, which is like my favorite. With good company that we're having cool conversation. And so in that moment, I was happy. And it wasn't about focusing on my problems. It was about focusing on how I felt in that moment, right? Now, if I would have focused on the pain, then that would have been my issue. But it's what I chose to focus on. It's what I chose to consciously shine my light on. And it wasn't my problems. It was like the moment. And when you focus on the moment and why should I be happy right now, you're going to see a whole long list of things. I'm comfortable, right? I'm not, I have a nice home. It's climate controlled, right? My skin feels great. You know what I mean? I have a nice bed. So when you do that, you pull yourself out from, okay, like what did your parents do to you when you were a teenager? Or shit, what's my boss going to say to me tomorrow? Or what did that person mean when that's your mind. It's not you. But if you pull all that energy out from all of this bullshit and just pull it into the now, there's happiness. And that's what meditation is, right? Is the recognition that your mind is constantly like swiveling from past to future, and just keep trying to bring it to, okay, that's great. That's all fine and dandy. But right now we're good. Hey, right now I'm good. All right. I'm happy right now. You're at peace right now. Even if you're in pain, you're still good right now. Whatever it is that you're thinking about that's causing you emotional pain, it's probably not happening right now. It's something that your mind has shifted you, right, to. In a way, it's a kind of a hallucination, right? Because you're seeing something and experiencing what's not present. So be present. Be here now. Okay, so now we talked about manifestation being basically bullshit, right? And how that kind of leads into suffering, right? You're trying to like force things to happen where you don't have any control. We've talked about a different perspective where we're basically saying, well, if you have an inherent desire for something, it's probably because it's tied to a future experience, probably. Very mindful of the words that I use, but I'm saying probably. Like there's a high probability that you have a desire for something. It's because you will or have experienced it in the future. So it's, in a way, that desire for something is foreshadowing a future experience. So all you have to do is persist and be consistent. And eventually you will reach that moment in space-time where you have that, that desire is actualized. But you don't do things blindly. You don't have blind hope. You just understand that just because you have a desire for something or you hope for something doesn't mean it's going to happen. So you got to mentally prepare yourself for that and accept what is. You accept people as they are. You almost appreciate them. You learn to appreciate them as they are. Right? So instead of sitting back like a critic or a judge, looking at a person and basically saying like, oh, I don't like that you did this or you did that. Understand that they're all part of an overall plot and this is how they're written. So you just learn to appreciate them as they are, to accept them as they are without trying to change them because you're just a character in the show. That is love, right? We all want people to love us. We want people to accept us as we are. I'll say that again. We all want people to love us. We want people to accept us as we are. But the way to that, because that's love, the way to that is by sitting back and accepting people as they are. When you sit back and you observe without judgment, watch people, interact with people like the personas that they are, interact with people like the avatars that they are, the pre-written avatars that they are, interact with people like the characters that they are. You sit back and watch them and go, you know what, this is a finely crafted work of art. Instead of saying, I don't like how you do your hair, or I don't like that, just don't be a dick. Get it? View them like a work of art. well, this is how this person talks. Well, that's interesting, right? Like, observe people like they're characters on your favorite movie or your favorite TV show, right? Because life is somebody's TV show, somebody's movie, right? We've got to be entertainment for somebody, if not our own selves, right? If this world is not like the future of entertainment for our own civilization, well, then it's clearly fucking aliens. Either way, right? We're characters, and if you're listening and this resonates with you, you're sentient on some level. If that's the perspective you choose to take, I toggle. Sometimes I wonder if we're just sentient characters in somebody else's TV show like Westworld. And sometimes I wonder if if we are consciousness, right? If our consciousness has been uploaded into this world, like some sort of, entertainment system, like Vanilla Sky, and, but entertainment. And we're just like, playing characters. And when we die or when we sleep, we take off our helmets and then go and live our world or live our lives, or maybe they don't have jobs, and then you just play as other characters and other whatever. But still, if you can sit, I'm reiterating the fuck out of this, okay? Because I'm going to come back and listen to this episode too, because it's a way to remind you to love. It is, but if you could sit and instead of saying and complaining and criticizing, right? Because all of that is on some level, you're acting as though you're in control of the narrative, of the character, of the personality, of their persona, and that they are in control of themselves. That's how they were pre-written, right? And to me, that's why one of the things that I love about determinism is that it does help you love people a bit more, right? Some people think, okay, well, and I've had somebody say this to me, right? You're just compliant, right? And you're just complacent. And you're just willing to sit on your laurels and say, well, there's nothing you can do anyway. No, that's not fucking true. That's bullshit. Characters still move the plot. They still play a part. It's fucking stupid. Not the individual, but the mindset and that attack. I apologize. But a character still plays a part. I can say that, okay, I'm not in control of the overall plot, but still play my part, right? I don't just wake up and do nothing. So I'm not, I get up and I interact. If I have a desire to reach out to somebody, right, I'm going to play my part in the overall narrative. I'm telling you, there's a greater intelligence that's directing all our paths. And the more conscious I am, and the longer I exist within this persona, the more apparent this thing makes itself to me, or this entity makes itself to me, or these entities, whatever you want to call it, the AI, the ASI, controlling all reality, the more prevalent it becomes, its presence becomes. Okay? So I'm still going to play my part. I'm still going to do the podcast. I'm still going to be compassionate. I'm still going to talk. I'm still going to share. I'm still going to read. I'm still going to create. All right? If I see wrong, I'm going to speak out against it. Because that's my persona. That's who this individual is. I'm going to play my role. If Tony Stark wakes up in the movie Iron Man and becomes conscious and realizes, oh shit, wait, I'm a character in a TV show that is bound to, I've got to do what I got to do, right? At the end of the day, he's still going to play his part. Maybe there's one part where he sits back and goes, I'm not going to do anything, which actually kind of saw happen because he kind of became self-aware in one of the Avengers movies. I think it's the last one where he, spoiler alert, I'm not going to say anything if you haven't seen it yet, but it's the last one. But he did kind of take a step back from the narrative and was like, I'm not really going to do this. But at the end of the day, the plot beckoned and it was in his character to do what he had to do. It was pre-programmed for him to be the hero. So he just went and did hero shit. So if you're listening to this, just because like determinism is a thing, right? Because we have no free will, but free will is an illusion and we're not really in control of anything, doesn't mean we don't have our parts to play. And I'm going to sidestep back to my dream. All right, so I had a horrible dream this morning. It was the most vivid dream I've ever had. And just a heads up, like violent content I'm about to explain. I'm going to try to not make it too violent, but I was a woman, Eastern European, and I was under like the bunkers of some sort of like palace or something like that, or foundation. And Americans were attacking, and like people were just running. I had to find like a bunch of bodies, and I hid behind a wall of dead bodies as this was happening. And like shrapnel and like, bullets were just ricocheting off of bodies. I looked ahead and I saw somebody's head. Like they had passed on, they had died, but there was just like bullets like just penetrating their head. And it was like the most violent, there was blood everywhere. And I just kept thinking, how am I not dead? It was war. I don't watch scary movies. Like, I don't like, Vampire Diaries or whatever. That's probably like the most intense, quote, violent show. I don't watch war movies. I don't watch things that are like that intense, because my brain kind of absorbs things. I certainly haven't watched anything like that recently, but it felt like I was there. There was fear. I could smell things. I could feel things. It was dripping. There was like rubble and dust and blood dripping. And like, I just kept waiting. I just wanted it to be, for nighttime to come so I could get away. But like nighttime would not come. So the skies were just repeatedly getting like lit up. It was like a permanent daytime. I don't know if a bomb had detonated or something nuclear had gone off. I don't know, but it was terrifying. And when it finally died down and I got away, I ended up being kind of like corralled by a bunch of American soldiers. And then I was in a group of other Eastern European women, and the Americans, was this big, tall, like American, like Marine or something, smoking a cigar with his dog tags. And we were just terrified they were going to harm us. And they said, we just want the keys. Just give us the keys. And so this older lady with a babushka on, had a basket of like silver and gold keys. And we gave them to the Americans. And they were like, we have to storm like the palace, or whatever. And then I woke up, and that was like this morning. And then the first thing I see when I go into Instagram was my cousin had sent me a video of Putin talking his shit about how he's going to basically nuke the entire world should X, Y, and Z happen. And my response to that is that, one, clearly we saw this coming. Those of us who've been awake and been paying attention to what's been happening with the whole COVID thing. The only thing that was going to shift the collective consciousness away from this whole bullshit was war. And there was a time, and this just doesn't happen anymore, but there was a time when if you had typed in World War III into your iMessage, it corrected it and capitalized the world and the war and the three, like it does with World War II, as though it had already happened and like it was an event, right? And that really like creeped me out. I took a screenshot of it. I have it in my phone somewhere, but I checked again today, and they've stopped doing that. They changed that, but it's like there is a small group of people, the 0.01% of fucking psychopaths, who are the natural predators of the rest of us. And they want the world to be a particular way. Heaven for them, hell for us. Right? And the way their power, because they understand that an individual is strong, but it's not powerful. Right? So think about an individual, like we have energy. So think about one individual, depending on the person, and having anywhere from 1 to 3 kilowatts or joules of energy, right? This is just for illustrative purposes, right? So one person, let's say I can move something with my mind. I can bend a spoon, okay, with my mind, okay? Now, that's just me. That's just one person. If you get 1,000 people with that same energy holding hands locked together, we can concentrate our energy, and we're going to bend more than spoons, right? We could lift a fucking building if we wanted to. That's I'm not saying this is actually a thing. I'm just saying, like, you got to think about each individual and their ability to steer the collective consciousness down a particular path. The reason why a Hitler was powerful was not because he did things on his own. It was that he was able to harness the power of the collective with his mouth, with his mind, with his ideas, with his speech, right? So these individuals know that one person cannot really move the entire race down a particular path, like what I've been talking about. You can't manifest. I can't sit here and be like, I'm going to manifest a reality where World War III doesn't happen. No, we have to get enough people working together to say collectively, we will not actualize that reality experience. On the opposite end, you have the psychopaths. They do a great job of working together while they divide us, the conscious. They work together. They're the opposite end. They're in the opposite side of the factions. And they know that if they want a particular reality experience, because, hey, look, if we go to war, it doesn't matter to them. They've got their fucking bunkers. You guys know that, right? None of us have bunkers. I don't have a bunker. If you ever have a bunker, holler at me. But they have their bunkers. So if anything goes down, this is zero, like it's not really, there's zero consequences. None of their children are going off to war, none of their siblings, none of their friends or family members are going off to war. So it's nothing for them. All of the risk comes to us. In order for this to work, in order for them to move the collective consciousness of 8 billion people down a particular path where my dream becomes reality, and it already is reality in some parts of the world, similar, they need to harness and they need the cooperation of millions of people, either complying or doing nothing. Either complying or doing nothing. You know, there's a scene, I always talk about this, like in a movie. Every time I watch a movie, there's like a mad king or something like that, right? That's just going off, going crazy, running his mouth like, yeah, let's just like destroy everything. And then I always look around at the characters standing around like the king. And they just go along with the king that's literally going to kill them or get them killed. And they do nothing. And my thought is always the same thing. Why doesn't somebody just take this dude out? They could save the rest of the world so much pain and misery if we stop allowing these fucking like imagine, let's go back to Hitler. Imagine like everybody around him looking, seeing what he's doing and thinking like, okay, like we've crossed lines. This is insane. Enough. Enough people have died. Enough children have died. Enough. We're tired of war. Enough. If we end up down a timeline, if we end up actualizing a timeline where World War III does occur, it is because we collectively allowed that shit to happen. We can't sit back and let these madmen, these psychopaths, keep steering us this way and that because they're fucking bored and have nothing else better to do. The way they do that is they have a very distinct understanding of the nature of this reality. And the nature of this reality is, one, they know that we are powerful, but we're only powerful working together. Which is why the pen is mightier than the sword, which is why they're going in on Rogan. It's funny to me that people care more about him saying the N-word than what he was saying and warning people about on his podcast. It's bullshit. When he signed and got the $100 million deal with Spotify, how come nobody said shit about the shit that he had been saying, right? How come nobody came out and said, you know what, maybe we shouldn't reward somebody who's been saying the N-word with a $100 million contract to continue to say things like he's been saying in the past? It didn't fucking matter. Right? But when it became, okay, he's speaking out against Big Pharma, let's cancel him because he said the N-word. Fuck you. Okay, you know what I'm tired of? I'm tired of entities who think they understand No. I'm tired of entities weaponizing Black people and using our emotions and our anger and our frustration with the status quo, like weaponizing that shit. Like, that's what they're doing. You're trivializing and weaponizing it. Right? So they wanted him off the air. That didn't work. So then now they're trying to pull up the things that he said in his past because they understand the power of a united collective. You know what? He said what he said. I've said some ignorant things in this podcast. I have. Because I'm not perfect. And I think that the fact that we live in the society right now, this is where we are, where everybody's walking around acting fucking perfect. There's something that one of my friends said. If we had cameras filming us 24/7 and broadcasting the shit that we say out for public consumption, we would all be canceled because we're all fucking imperfect. So the people who are walking around judging and saying, oh, he did this, or a lot of the people pointing fingers are guilty of about the same thing, if not worse. I'm not going to say that the things that Rogan said were not offensive or hurtful. I'm saying, why is it coming up now? When he's speaking out against tyranny and big pharma. Pharmaceutical companies don't give a fuck about us. Pharmaceutical companies don't give a fuck about us. So to me, it seems like you're trying to use Black people and Black rage as a cat paw in order to essentially silence somebody who's speaking out. How about we focus more on what is going on and what is being said? And I'm sorry if you are for him being censored now because he's saying some shit that you don't like. Please understand that in 2 to 4 years, that if we allow this to happen, it's going to happen the opposite. Right now, if you want to play this, dichotomy duality game, right now, liberals are in charge. It's going to be a matter of time between 2 to 4 to 6 years, whatever, where conservatives are in charge. And then they're going to start doing some things that you won't like. And ultimately, when I say liberals and conservatives, I'm not talking about the people. I'm not talking about 300 million Americans. I'm talking about whatever fucking left-wing, right-wing governing board. They don't care. Ultimately, a government, the longer it holds power, the more it moves towards totalitarianism. Thank you. Totalitarianism and fascism, because it wants control. That is its function. The function of government is to control. It starts off small and grows and grows and grows and grows. If you are if you are okay with people being discriminated against because they are saying, I don't want to put this in my body. Look, I am willing to isolate. I am willing to, wear a mask, X, Y, and Z or whatever. They're already saying, like, okay, right? It's their body. You can't, out of your mouth, say that you're pro-choice and what a woman wants to do with her body should be her choice, but then turn around, like, if you can't be for medical freedom, but then against medical freedom. The entities that you're, like, and I know it's probably nobody that's listening to this podcast, but the entities that some people are going hard for are the same entities that will send our loved ones out to die in some fucked up bullshit, dick swinging game. And they're going to use the media to scare people into clamoring for war. Although I think as humanity as a whole is becoming more and more conscious, we're looking at this and saying, no, we don't want this. Although I'm terrified that there might be a false flag, and terrified is too strong of a word because right now I'm just watching. But I feel as though there might end up being a false flag event that will make it so that once again, the power of the collective is harnessed towards some sort of war, where they will manipulate the situation so that people start clamoring, okay, it's time to go to war. And we've got to grow past this as a species. Nobody that I know wants a war, but also I don't know any fucking psychopaths. Right? So at some point, we got to take a step back and realize there's 8 billion of us and literally like 1,000 of them. And I'm being generous with that amount. And they know that they can actualize certain reality experiences. It's not inevitable. We don't have to go to war. We don't have to do this as a species. We don't have to destroy ourselves as a species. We can do better than this collectively. If we just come together and say no, which is why they work so hard to divide us. Because there's power in the collective moving together towards the actualization of a particular reality. See, that's when you can manifest things. Manifestation only applies when you can essentially trick the will of a large group of people or harness the will. However you want to do it. If you use the media to control, that's where true power lies. This is why they ban books and burn books, which is why they censor YouTube videos and posts and things like that, because that's where true power lies. It's not from sitting and writing some shit over and over again. That if you want to manifest, you're talking about really manifesting a reality experience, you get enough people thinking the way you want them to think. And that's how you harness the power of the collective towards manifesting a reality experience. But it has to be a large collective thinking in a particular way and then making it so. But that's why they use these techniques. Any means necessary. That's how this shit works. Anyway, this is a longer episode than normal. I think this month I will be putting out a couple of episodes on the TikTok channel. Been working on some scripts, so be on the lookout for that. If you're not following on our Discord, hop on the Discord. Yeah, let's try to appreciate each other as we are, without judgment. You know, observing each other as we would observe our favorite characters on a TV show. You know, make our suggestions, but understand that nobody's under obligation to think what you think or act the way you act or believe the way you believe. All right? Most people aren't even in control of themselves. You're not going to be able to control them. You're not a programmer, right? Work on you, changing you, right? Understand there's only so much that you can control. And just going with the flow. All right, as you can hear, my voice is tired. So I'll hit you guys up next week.